Good morning, my name is Torres, and today I'm going to be presenting William Shakespeare and Hamlet. William Shakespeare was a renowned English poet, playwright, and actor born in 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon. Shakespeare was a prolific writer during the Renaissance ages of British theatre. Shakespeare's plays are perhaps his most enduring legacy, but they are not all he wrote. Shakespeare's poems also remain popular to this day. John Shakespeare married Mary Arden, and together they had 8 children. John and Mary lost 2 daughters as infants, so William became their eldest child. John Shakespeare worked as a glove maker, but he also became an important figure in the town of Stratford by fulfilling civic positions. His elevated status meant that he was even more likely to have sent his children, including William, to the local grammar school. William Shakespeare would have lived with his family in their house on Henley Street until he turned 18. When he was 18, Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway, who was 26. It was a rushed marriage because Anne was already pregnant at the time of the ceremony. Together they had 3 children. Their first daughter, Susanna, was born 6 months after the wedding and was later followed by twins Hamnet and Judith. Hamnet died when he was just 11 years old. We know Shakespeare's twins were baptized in 1585 and that by 1592 his reputation was established in London, but the intervening years are considered a mystery. Scholars generally refer to these years as the lost years. During his time in London, Shakespeare's first printed books were published. There were 2 long poems, Venus and Adonis of 1593 and The Rape of Lucrezia in 1594. He also became a founding member of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, a company of actors. Shakespeare was the company's regular dramatist, producing on average 2 plays a year for almost 20 years. He remained with the company for the rest of his career, during which time it evolved into the King's Men under the patronage of King James I from 1603. During his time in the company, Shakespeare wrote many of his most famous tragedies, such as King Lear and Macbeth, as well as great romances like The Winter's Tale and The Tempest. Altogether, Shakespeare's works include 38 plays, 2 narrative poems, and 154 sonnets, and a variety of other poems. No original manuscripts of Shakespeare's plays are known to exist today. It is thanks to a group of actors from Shakespeare's company that we have about half of the plays at all. They collected them for publication after Shakespeare died, preserving the plays. These writings were brought together in what is known as the First Folio. It contained 36 of his plays, but none of his poetry. Shakespeare's legacy is as rich and diverse as his work. His plays have spawned countless adaptations across multiple genres and cultures. His plays have had an enduring presence of stage and film. His writings have been compiled in various editions of the complete works of William Shakespeare, which include all his plays, sonnets, and other poems. William Shakespeare continues to be one of the most important literary figures of the English language. Shakespeare's success in the London theatres made him considerably wealthy, and by 1597 he was able to purchase New Place, the largest house in the borough of Stratford-upon-Avon. Although his professional career was spent in London, he maintained close links with his native town. Recent archaeological evidence discovered on the site of Shakespeare's new place shows that Shakespeare was only ever an intermittent lodger in London. This suggests he divided his time between Stratford and London. In his later years, he may have spent more time in Stratford-upon-Avon than scholars previously thought. Shakespeare died in Stratford-upon-Avon on April 23, 1616, at the age of 52. He is buried in the sanctuary of Parish Church, Holy Trinity. William Shakespeare's world. He used to say that the world is a stage and men and women are merely players. Now we're going to talk about the Renaissance from 14th to 17th century. The Renaissance was a fervent period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages, generally described as taking place from the 14th to 17th century. The Renaissance promoted the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. Some of the greatest thinkers, authors, statesmen, scientists, and artists in human history thrived during this era, while global exploration opened up new lands and cultures to European commerce. The Renaissance is credited with bringing the gap between the Middle Ages and modern-day civilization. Several factors contributed to the Renaissance. The growth of trade and commerce created prosperous cities and classes of people with the wealth to support education and the arts. Italian city-states helped spread Renaissance ideas. The new philosophy of humanism spurred interest in learning and fresh ways of thinking. The Renaissance period cultivated a new change in art, knowledge, and culture. It changed the way the citizens thought, with first the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art, as well as the new discoveries in travel, invention, and style. The Renaissance arrived at different countries at varying times. Italy was the first to experience this movement beginning in the 14th century, while it did not reach England until the 16th century. A consensus among historians is that by the early 17th century, the Renaissance had come to an end. Historical background in Hamlet. Hamlet was written towards the end of Queen Elizabeth's rule when the English people were nervous about succession. Queen Elizabeth's long reign represented a time of peace after lengthy turmoil. Today, Hamlet is considered one of the most important works in world literature. It is considered by many to be William Shakespeare's greatest play and to be perhaps the greatest work of literature written in English. Shakespeare had many influences for Hamlet. The 12th century is history of Denmark, Icelandic sagas, Keith Thomas' The Spanish Tragedy, and the death of Shakespeare's own son, Hamlet, amongst them. Major conflict Hamlet feels a responsibility to avenge his father's murder by his uncle Claudius, but Claudius is now the king and thus well protected. Moreover, Hamlet struggles with his doubts and whether he can trust the ghost and whether killing Claudius is the appropriate thing to do. The immediate source of Hamlet is an earlier play dramatizing the same story of Hamlet, the Danish prince who must avenge his father. Literary devices used in Hamlet. Hamlet is Shakespeare's longest and arguably most famous play. It implements many literary devices or techniques used by writers to convey a message. Shakespeare uses repetition when Hamlet repeats words repeatedly. Metaphors are subtle comparisons used to communicate complex ideas. Shakespeare's use of the phrase "sea of troubles" in Hamlet's "to be or not to be" speech is an example of metaphor. The quote, "his beard was as white as snow," is an example of simile, or a direct comparison that helps illustrate an important image. Hamlet has been analyzed for years from many perspectives. The most common literary discussion regarding Hamlet is whether the prince is insane, and, by extension, whether the ghost is real or imagined. Literary critics will sometimes rely on an author's literary devices to better understand what the author's intended or deeper meaning was in writing the piece. Now we're going to talk about the characters in order of appearance. Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, the Crown Prince of Denmark, who returns from the university in Wittenberg, Germany, to find his father dead, his mother married to a king's brother, Claudius, and Claudius' newly served crowned king. Claudius, King of Denmark, dead King Hamlet's brother, who was usurped the throne and married his sister-in-law. Gertrude, Queen of Denmark, Prince Hamlet's mother, King Hamlet's widow, King Claudius' wife. The ghost spirit of the late King Hamlet, condemned to walk the earth until his soul is cleansed of its sins. Polonius, the elderly Lord Chamberlain's chief counsellor to Claudius. Horatio, a commoner. Horatio went to school with Hamlet and remains his loyal best friend. Laertes, a student in Paris. Laertes is Polonius' son and Ophelia's brother. He returns from school because of King Hamlet's death, leaves to go back to Paris, and then returns after his own father's murder. Ophelia, daughter of Polonius, sister of Laertes. Ophelia is beloved of Hamlet. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, classmates of Hamlet's in Wittenberg. Claudius summons them to Elsinore to spy on Prince Hamlet. Fortinbras, King of Norway, bound to avenge his father's death by the Danes' hands. Osric, affected courtier who plays a minor role as the king's messenger, as an umpire of the fencing match between Hamlet and Laertes. Voltimand and Cornelius, Danish courtiers who are sent as ambassadors to the court of Norway. Marcellus and Bernardo, Danish officers on guard at the castle of Elsinore. Francisco, Danish soldier on guard at the castle of Elsinore. Reinaldo, young man whom Polonius intrudes and sends to Paris to observe and report on Laertes' conduct. Two clowns, also called the grave diggers, two rustics identified as clowns who dig Ophelia's grave. Setting of Hamlet: time, place, and social environment. Shakespeare set Hamlet in Elsinore, a remote royal castle in Denmark where the action is set in various parts of the castle. There is also one scene that takes place away from the castle on a plain in Denmark. The map below shows all the locations Shakespeare used for Hamlet. Main conflict in Hamlet. Hamlet feels a responsibility to avenge his father's murder by his uncle Claudius, but Claudius is now the king and thus well protected. Moreover, Hamlet struggles with his doubt about whether he can trust the ghost and whether killing Claudius is the appropriate thing to do. Now we're going with the plot sequence of events. Act 1. A ghost appears. Old Hamlet, the previous king of Denmark, has died and his ghost has been seen on the battlements of the castle. An old friend of Hamlet's, Horatio, sees the ghost. Gertrude remarriage. Hamlet has come home and is struggling to cope with the fact that his mother, Gertrude, has married his uncle, Claudius, so quickly after his father's death. Claudius is now king and asks Hamlet to treat him like a father, but Hamlet reacts badly to this, saying that he is a little more than a king and less than kind. News of the ghost. Horatio tells Hamlet about the ghost, saying, "I knew your father. These hands are not more like." Hamlet goes to investigate and see if it could really be his father's ghost. Ophelia is warned. Laertes leaves Elsinore and warns his sister Ophelia to stay away from Hamlet before he goes. Ophelia then tells her father that Hamlet has expressed his love for her. Her father, Polonius, forbids her to see him. Hamlet sees the ghost. The ghost of old Hamlet appears to Hamlet and he questions it. The ghosts tell him that the serpent that did sting the father's life now wears his crown and asks Hamlet to avenge his murder. Act 2. Hamlet behaves strangely. Ophelia tells her father that Hamlet has been behaving strangely and that he visited in her room, as if he had been loosed out of hell. Polonius is worried and thinks that Ophelia hath made him mad by refusing to see him. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern arrive. King Claudius employs two of Hamlet's old friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, to find out what is wrong with Hamlet. Is Hamlet mad? Polonius goes to Claudius and Gertrude to tell them that Hamlet has gone mad, with love for Ophelia. The king and queen want evidence, so Polonius suggests they listen in on a conversation between his daughter and Hamlet and mark the encounter to see how he behaves. The players arrive. A group of traveling actors or players arrive at the castle to perform and Hamlet arranged for them to perform a play called The Murder of Gonzaga, in which a king is murdered in a similar way to the way the old king was murdered by Claudius. Act 3. Hamlet reflects on life and death. Claudius and Polonius spy on Hamlet and wait for him to meet Ophelia, so they can see if his love for Ophelia is causing his strange behavior. Before talking to Ophelia, Hamlet reflects on life and existence, delivering by his famous speech and starts, "To be or not to be, that is the question." Hamlet and Ophelia argue. Ophelia returns some of her resemblances to Hamlet, while Claudius and Polonius watch in secret. Hamlet confuses her by saying, "I did love you once, and I loved you not," before telling her to go to a nunnery and never have any children. This upsets Ophelia. The players play. Hamlet asks Horatio to watch Claudius carefully during the player's performance to see how he reacts and if he is guilty. Before the players begin, Hamlet speaks to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and suggests he knows that they have been spying on him. When the king is poisoned in the play, Claudius storms out and Hamlet and Horatio's suspicions are confirmed. Claudius' confession. While Claudius is praying alone, he confesses that he murdered his brother for my crown, mine own ambition, and my queen. Hamlet finds Claudius but convinces himself not to kill him while he is praying because his soul will go to heaven, saying, "And now I'll do it," and so he goes to heaven. Hamlet murders Polonius. Hamlet goes to see his mother and threatens her, accusing her of being immoral. Polonius watches from behind an harassment in Gertrude's closet while all this happens. When he hears Polonius behind the arras, Hamlet stabs the screen and kills Polonius. He carries on accusing his mother of bad behavior, and then the ghost appears again. When he talks to the ghost, Gertrude believes he is hallucinating and declares, "Alas, he is mad." Hamlet takes the body. Hamlet tells his mother he is going to England to study with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, as Claudius planned. Gertrude agrees to keep secret what has happened, and Hamlet exits, takes Polonius' dead body with him. Act 4. Hamlet leaves for England. Hamlet will not tell Rosencrantz or Guildenstern where Polonius' body is, but eventually tells Claudius in a riddle where the body can be found. Claudius plots to have Hamlet killed in England. Ophelia's goes mad. Queen Gertrude meets Ophelia, who is singing sad songs and speaking strangely. When Claudius joins them, he tells Horatio to watch her and declares this is the poison of the grief. It springs all from her father's death. Laertes returns. Laertes comes home because of his father's death, and he is angry to learn that Hamlet wasn't punished for killing his father. When he sees Ophelia behaving strangely, his anger grows, saying, "And so have I been noble father lost," a sister driven into desperate terms. Claudius and Laertes plot to kill Hamlet when he returns. Hamlet returns. As the king and Laertes plot, they receive news that the ship Hamlet was traveling on was attacked by pirates. Hamlet was captured but treated well by the pirates and has returned to Denmark. They plan to invite him to a duel and dip Laertes' sword in deadly poison. Ophelia is dead. Gertrude announces that Ophelia has killed herself, saying, "Your sister's drowned, Laertes." Act 5. The Grave Diggers. Two grave diggers debate whether Ophelia should be buried on church grounds because she killed herself. Hamlet appears and sees the grave diggers taking bones out of the ground as they dig out of a new grave. Hamlet inspects a skull and realizes it was the head of a jester that he once knew, called Yorick. Ophelia's funeral. Coffin bearers bring out the body of Ophelia, and Laertes jumps into her grave to embrace his sister one last time. Hamlet appears and the two men fight over who loved her more, with Hamlet saying, "I loved Ophelia, 14,000 brother, could not, with all their quantity of love, make up my son." Horatio intervenes and leads Hamlet away. Laertes challenges Hamlet. Hamlet tells Horatio that Claudius tried to have him killed in England, but he changed the order so Rosencrantz and Guildenstern will be killed. A servant brings Hamlet an invitation to fight Laertes. Hamlet accepts. Hamlet and Laertes fight. Before the duel, Hamlet says sorry to Laertes, saying, "Give me your pardon, sir. I've done you wrong." But the fight goes ahead. They both choose their swords, and Laertes picks the one he has poisoned. During the duel, Gertrude thinks poisoned wine meant for Hamlet, and she begins to die slowly. The swords get mixed up during the fight and both men are wounded with the poisoned sword. Laertes reveals plan, and Hamlet then killed his uncle Claudius. Hamlet's death. Hamlet tells Horatio that Fortinbras, the Prince of Norway, should become the new king of Denmark. He asks Horatio to tell Fortinbras and the rest of the world what happened before he says his last word, rests in silence, and dies. Moments later, Fortinbras arrives. Now I'm going to explain the themes in Hamlet. Themes are central to understanding Hamlet as a play and identifying Shakespeare's social and political commentary. Mortality. The weight of one's mortality and the complexities of life and death are introduced from the beginning of Hamlet. In the wake of his father's death, Hamlet can stop pondering and considering the meaning of life and its eventually ending. Many questions emerge as the text progresses. What happens when you die? If you're murdered, then would you go to heaven? Do kings truly have free paths to heaven? In Hamlet's mind, the idea of dying isn't so bad. It's the uncertainty of the afterlife that frightens Hamlet away from suicide, even though he's obsessed with the notion. A turning point for Hamlet occurs in the graveyard scene in Act 5. Before Hamlet has been appalled and revolted by the moral corruption of the living. Seeing Jerich's school, someone Hamlet loved and respected, propels Hamlet's realization that death eliminates the difference between people. The sheer numbers of bodies at the end of Hamlet can be misleading. Even though 8 of the 9 primary characters die, the question of mortality is not fully answered. The question about death, suicide, and what comes after are left unanswered. What Hamlet presents is an exploration and discussion without a true resolution. Madness. Hamlet originally acts mad, crazy, not angry, to fool people into think he is harmless while proving his father's death and Claudius' involvement. Early on the bumbling Polonius says, "Through this be madness, yet there is still a method is not." Act 2, Scene 2. Polonius' assertion is ironic because he is right and wrong. Polonius falsely believes Hamlet's madness stems from Hamlet's love of Ophelia. To notice a method behind the crazy talk was impressive of Polonius, but as the play progresses, Hamlet's behavior becomes more erratic. His acting mad seems to cause Hamlet to lose his grip on reality. The circumstances he must manage emotionally are difficult, to say the least. Succumbing to physical violence when under extreme stress shows that Hamlet has deeper set issues than merely acting mad. In reflection, Hamlet's choices and impulses beg the question, what gives him the right to act as such without consequences? Woman. The presence of only 2 named female characters says something about the role of women within Hamlet. The death of both women also indicates a social commentary. Hamlet is at his most agitated state when talking to either female character. Although he cares for both, he is suspicious as well. In the case of his mother, Gertrude, Hamlet feels she remarried too quickly and that her remarriage means she didn't love her first husband all that much. The idea freaks Hamlet out. Then there's Ophelia. From the way the characters talk, we know Hamlet has been wooing Ophelia for some time. But after Hamlet starts to act mad, it doesn't take long for him to assume that Ophelia is in cahoots with Gertrude. Claudius and Polonius. Ophelia obeyed her father and her monarch. In both cases, Hamlet feels as if each woman has let him down, respectively. His critical and quick point out flaws through puns and backhanded comments. Ophelia is usually viewed as a true victim, while Gertrude's role is interpreted with more flexibility. In either case, the role is treated of woman in Hamlet is essential to discuss with an open mind. And the last theme, political livelihood. The state of the nation in Denmark is deteriorating. The death of a king throws any nation into political turmoil. With a new king on the throne and the deceased king's son acting erratically, something's clearly off. When the guard Marcellus famously says, "Something is rotten in the state of Denmark," at 1 Scene 4, he is not being ironic about Hamlet's bathing habits. Marcellus' words refer of how something evil and vile is afoot. This moment could be interpreted as foreshadowing of the impending death of most of the principal characters, but it also refers to the political unrest Denmark is feeling as a nation. The political livelihood of Denmark can be directly linked back to the mental state of Hamlet at many points throughout the play. This is the end of my video, and thank you so much for watching.